Panama. Hey everybody, welcome back. Looks like we're diving headlong into a recession as the economy's cooling down, the job market's cooling down, people aren't buying anything, and the AC's got to go a little bit up. So I apologize if you're hearing that. But is it really all that bad? Let's think about it. We've been going through this for a while now. The cost of living is going up, inflation's going up. Nobody can afford a house, nobody can afford a rent. For a lot of people, it seems like a fairly decent idea just to sell off all your worldly possessions and either leave the country or go live in a tent in the woods. So how bad can a recession really be for us normal people? Because I've been having this idea lately, because I know it's all over the place and all the doom and gloom that we have on YouTube right now. The American dream is dead. But the big question for me and the big question for you is, if the American dream is truly dead, then what comes next? And I think that's what we really got to focus on, because I think the old model, right? We need a true paradigm shift in what we believe fulfillment in life in America actually is. Because that traditional mindset that says I'm going to have a nice house with a picket fence, a dog, 2 kids, and a beautiful wife, if we're being completely honest, just isn't reality for most people out there. And should it be reality? Do we all deserve the greatest things in life? Right? And if that is the greatest things in life, because I don't know if you've been in the dating market in America or the rest of the West these days, but pickings really seem slim. No matter what age you are, everything just kind of seems a bit cursed these days. So I mean, what would even be the point of that if we're being realistic, right? To pursue that old American dream, right? To go get a house where you're going to be paying a mortgage for the next 30 years, while at the same time wages aren't going up because you thought it was a good idea, but then you find out the realization that taxes and insurance are eventually going to bleed you dry until eventually you have to sell off the house and go live in your Astrovan. The materialistic idea, the aesthetic of kind of that traditional 1950s happy couple, that was never really true, but was something very common in advertising, something very common in the kind of Norman Rockwell. I know that was before the 1950s, but that kind of aesthetic. The truth is that doesn't fit in modern day America. So what are we looking at? Like I said, I think we have to move beyond materialistic fulfillment to really find what happiness is for us. And for the most part, it's just some kind of security, financial security, security in health. And I think that that's where our society at a necessity has to move next, because unless something happens in the price of assets all over the United States takes a huge dump while at the same time income goes up, which is never going to happen, most Americans would just be delusional to try to constantly pursue that for their entire lives and maybe attain it when they're 50 or 60 years old. I mean, we have to face facts here, and that is that reality in the United States has fundamentally changed when it comes to everything. When it comes to education, when it comes to family, when it comes to business, when it comes to your finances, everything has changed. Mostly for the worse, because I mean, everybody still kind of wants that American dream. Over 50% of the country still believes that the American dream exists and they're actively pursuing it. But I think it was like 46% of the United States just doesn't believe that it's attainable at all. And it's easy to believe because 46% of the United States has no money. And if you have no money and if you're working all the time, I mean, how can you think that you can actually go out there and achieve those things that just seem like they're forever going to be out of reach? Like I said, there is another way you can do it. You can always just leave the country. And I think that we're going to see a lot more people doing that because, yes, personally, I believe if I said many times, it is a very viable solution. But I understand because I hear in the comment section all the time, well, you can't just run away from your problems. You know, it's not going to fix you. But to be honest, it's not about fixing you. If the economy is trash, if your nation is going to hell, then what's the point of really staying? You can stay and try to fight, but at the same time, if you're just a person, you're just a peasant, and there's no solidarity in the community or in the country, how can you actually affect any change? And I know that everyone's kind of rooting for the collapse, but what happens after the collapse is a whole nother story altogether. And it's not exactly going to be a fairy tale, that's for sure. So all it is becoming a common sentiment that the American dream just isn't in America anymore and you have to go elsewhere to get it. At the same time, I think that it will arise again. It's just going to look very different, but it's definitely not going to happen anytime soon because the kind of social change that it would take, a true paradigm shift in the belief of what actually makes us happy, is going to take generations, really. But the things that we are going to need to focus on, because it can't be focused around assets, like I said, it's going to have to be what fulfills us simply on an emotional level and one of security. The truth is there has to be a complete overhaul to our system. We need to accept things like larger social safety nets, And that's a scary thing to a lot of people because they're like, well, that's what got us to this point in the first place. And I don't think so. I don't think that's what, you can't look at all the spending that's been going on for the past couple of generations and say, oh, well, this is because of Medicare. This is because of Medicaid. No. America spends money frivolously everywhere. I mean, you can have Doge go in there with a bunch of 20-year-old crypto boys and find all the issues that they have. But I mean, government waste is always going to be there. There's really no pulling that back. There's no closing that door. As long as our government exists, they're going to spend money. As long as they have access to the Fed, they're going to spend money. They're going to print more money and spend it. So like kind of just the wheel keeps on going. So the thing is you have to hop off that wheel, or in a better case, just break that wheel altogether and start over. But the amount of chaos that it's going to take to do that just immediately is not really feasible, I think. Not with the population that we have. But like I said, throughout generations, I think it's very achievable. Because the younger generations aren't austere. The younger generations are global. The younger generations are the future. And I think it's through their wishes that we're going to see things like universal health care become a norm. I mean, eventually America just has to hop on track with that. Because like I said, the social safety nets are going to have to grow. If we have a declining workforce because people aren't having kids, I mean, you can't do away with the social safety net where you're going to have nothing but elderly people. So unless you have a complete demographic replacement of this country, you're going to have to make some social adjustments. This is just the way that it is. And I think that that's where the American dream comes in. I think the new American dream is just going to be this. I have a roof over my head. I can afford food. I can go to the doctor. I can have kids. That's simple. And how do we get there? Well, it's going to take taxing a lot of people. It's going to be taxing a lot of rich people. And I mean, I know that's, again, another unwelcome solution, but I mean, it's just true. It's where it's going. Listen, if the vast majority of money is being funneled to a very few people, say we stop printing money altogether and we cut down on government spending. The fact is, the vast majority of debt and wealth that is in this country is owned by a very few people. So if you have someone like Elon Musk, who has more money than 50% of people in America, I mean, and we have, what, 800 billionaires in this country? And that's not just 1 billion or 2 billion, multiple billions, hundreds of billions, right? This needs to be taxed. America has to go back into a deflationary state, and we got to start taxing people. Either that or we're doing all-out Roman proscriptions, and that's not something I don't think the American people have the stomach for, at least not yet. Because once the hunger hits, hey, the gloves are off, really. Because we're going to have to fund these programs. And the fact is, we just need to accept at this point that automation and AI are going to be taking over pretty much everything, and not everyone can be a plumber. So a universal basic income is just going to have to be there at some point. This is not any kind of utopian dream. This isn't any kind of communist fan fiction. This is just reality. If there's no jobs over there because they've been taken over by bots, people still need to earn money. But if there's no way for them to earn money, how do you expect them not to just burn the entire system down? And that's why I think universal basic income becomes a necessity, because without it, you're going to have chaos, anarchy, and revolution. And there's one thing that I've learned at this point, that the government will do pretty much anything to avoid a revolution at this point. And if they have to bend the knee a little bit, and even though at first they'll use force to crack down on the American people to get them to bend the knee, eventually they're going to have to cave in. Because again, they don't really have a choice. You can look at the military and say that, well, they'll deploy against the people. And you know, I can say that there's an argument for this now. Absolutely. But we're talking about a couple generations from now. And I think that things are going to have to change a lot by then. Because at that point, if you have a couple generations that were raised in abject poverty and they know it's the government's fault, they know it's corporations' fault, even if they do join the military, they're going to be very resentful towards you if you give them orders to actually turn against their own people. Because class loyalty is actually a thing. And it doesn't matter how capitalist you are, nobody loves a class traitor. Nobody likes it at all. You're a collaborator. In World War II, you would have been called a collaborator. The thing is, right now, America, we're entering into the age of the oligarch, and we're seeing it all change before our very eyes. The wealth disparity in America is greater than it's ever been in human history, and it's accelerating at rapid speed. And what happens every time there's a recession? We see even greater transfer of wealth. So what happens when 1% of the country ends up having 99% of the wealth? Well, if the American people still want to have the American dream, if the American people want to have any kind of chance at safety and security in their lifetime and any kind of financial or personal freedom, guess what? That 99% is going to have to leverage their numbers and powers against the 1% to actually tax them. And that 1% not just being the people, but actually ratcheting up corporate taxes so you can actually fund these things because they're going to be a necessity. You can talk about the very few people who are scamming the system, but if you honestly believe that the few people that are scamming the system out there are a good excuse to tear down the entire social safety net that America has worked so hard to build over generations, you have absolutely drank the Kool-Aid, right? Generations have fought for that to be your birthright, and I think that that's what people are forgetting. If you hate Social Security, if you hate Medicare, if you hate these social programs, then you've been trained to be against your fellow American citizen. Because the us and them doesn't need to be left and right. It never should have been in the first place. The us and them in this country has always been those on top and everyone else underneath. But we've been absolutely played by people who've been trained their entire lives to game the system, and the people have really suffered for it. So no, tax them to death. Absolutely. Tax them until, 90% tax rate, and they're still fine. 90% tax rate, and some of these people are still raking in billions of dollars a year. Hey, that's fine. I don't care. There's no sweat off my back. If it's going to get some people off the streets, if it's going to put a roof over people's heads, if it's going to do away with childhood food insecurity in our country, guess what? I'm not going to shed a tear for these rich people or for the corporations just because they're not making record profits year after year. And I think that that has to become a much more welcome and common sentiment among the commons, right? Us poors, us thrifts. We need to accept that. We need to accept the fact that the asset class, the wealthiest people in this country, have systematically destroyed our nation and have constructed an entire ideology that pulls in people while masquerading in the robes of patriotism. But the whole thing's a lie. Your loyalty and fidelity should never be to your nation, it should be to your people. But the American people who support only the government while at the same time hating the other half of the American people, you are the problem. You are the enemy of the people. In fact, that is exactly what you are. If you've aligned yourself against a corporate or governmental entity against the people, then you are just that. You are the enemy of the people. So stop, come back, be with the people, fight for the people. Fight for Social Security, fight for Medicare and Medicaid, fight for rental assistance, fight for price controls, fight to limit the corporate profit that these people are raking in while at the same time building systems that take away your inheritance by developing reverse mortgage programs so that the banks take all the housing after the elderly die, doing away with Medicare and Medicaid that pay for elderly care so that they have to actually sell off their properties or dip into their savings and retirements and liquidate all those assets just so that they can pay for their care. Again, a lot of these tax bills and everything have chipped away at the American dream by creating a financial environment where people just cannot have any ownership in assets in this country. It's been a consolidation of ownership of assets, and it's through the ownership of assets that the generation of wealth is actually accomplished. So if you don't have the ability to attain any assets, which at this point now the vast majority of Americans don't have the ability to do, then Americans have been locked out of the future of their country or any kind of ownership, any kind of power. And because of the ideological paradigm that actually reigns supreme in this country right now, if you're not an asset owner, you're just seen as a drain and a leech on the system, and you deserve no pity. We have moved back centuries, ladies and gentlemen, to the era where landowners are important and everyone else doesn't matter. How weird is that? How weird is that? Is that making America great again? No, that's making America feudal again. And that's not something that anybody here in America should want or strive for. The American dream is alive and well, but it's in a completely different form than it's ever been, and we need to accept that, and we need to fight for that. We need to fight for keeping the things that keep people safe, keep people housed, keep people fed, and keep people educated, because those are the most important things that have brought this country to actually having anything resembling greatness. It isn't just the military might. It isn't just the size of our government. It isn't our big white buildings in Washington, D.C. No, it's the people. It's the people and the paths that have been cleared out by generations before us to actually go into the land of milk and honey, to actually go into a place of happiness and safety and security. And these things are worth fighting for, because that's where the American dream is. Old American dream, the materialistic one, it's dead, it's dying, it's forgotten, it's been destroyed, right? It's been torn down, thrown into a ditch, and lit on fire. But the new American dream is still alive. We just have to take back control, keep building on it, and maintain it, and keep these corporate leeches and these oligarchs the fuck away from it. That's what we need to do. But anyway, a little rant, a little happy. I don't think this is very negative in my opinion. Listen, we're all dealing with the hardship of what's going on right now together. So we need to understand if we're going through it together, let's trauma bond a little bit. Let's see eye to eye on these things. Let's look across the aisles. Yeah, fuck you, but at the same time, you're still my countryman. You know, we still have a future together. Our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, they're gonna inherit this piece of shit one day. So let's make it the most polished turd possible. That's really all we can do. But anyway, thanks for stopping by. You know, I think it's a good talk today. Let me know what you think in the comment section. It can't always be so serious, and I think these are serious topics, but at the same time, with everything being so dark and gloomy as they have been lately, I think a little bit of constructive criticism and a little bit of humor kind of goes a long way. I think this approach is just, it's more real, it's all more authentic to me, because this whole thing is just kind of a shit show at this point. Like I said, we're all shoveling shit together. So, you know, let's put the shovels down for a little bit and just appreciate that we still do have an opportunity, because there's going to be a new world ahead of us. Because the entire generation that's been in control of this country for a very long time is going away, which means that a new era of leadership is ahead of us. So in the next changing of the guard of leadership in this country, we need to be very aware of what these people are being taught, what they represent, and actually watch them. Because that's one of the great things about the time we live in right now. Everything is recorded, right? You can't get away from anything. You said something once when you're 12 years old, it's going to be brought back when you're 54 years old, you know? But hey, thanks for stopping by, everyone. Hope you have a good one. Hey everybody, if you're still here at this point, just so you know, we started another channel as I am beginning a weight loss journey, because I have gotten in horrible shape over the past couple months, and it's time to change that and take back my health. And I invite you to join us on this 100-day journey of weight loss and fitness. So it's gonna be pretty thorough, but it's all positive. It's all about positivity and learning and get some hard work in. So the new channel is called Large Man Health, and I am putting the first video up today. So go over and check it out. It's gonna be pretty simple, but like I said, it's gonna be every day. But again, I invite you to come over and join us as we strive for a little bit of change in our personal lives. And like I said, a real positive attitude. So I hope you have a good one. Come on over.